Hey guys, I haven't made a video in a while. Like for real this time. But the cast of season 14 of RuPaul's Drag Race came out a few days ago, and there's a lot of discourse about it, and I really feel like I need to say something. So all the discourse is around a straight man being cast on the show. It's the first time like a straight man's been cast on the show in every form of Drag Race in every country. And I'll be honest, when I first heard that there was going to be a straight man on Drag Race, I had a lot of like preconceived notions about that. So most of like the straight male drag I'm familiar with, it's kind of it's a similar type of thing, and it's very different from what tends to be featured on Drag Race. It's usually a lot of character work, a lot of minimal makeup. It tends to kind of mock women. And this type of drag would obviously have a lot of issues with the Drag Race format. Just thinking about how much Drag Race is like showcasing looks, like showing a lot of diversity in your looks. Most straight drag queens literally have one wig. I've always kind of felt that like Coco Peru and like Dina Martina kind of fall into that category, even though they're obviously not straight. And that's no shade to them. Like I actually much prefer that kind of drag, especially when it comes to a stage show. They're much funnier. But when I looked through the cast of season 14 looking for the straight queen, no one stood out to me. Like, no one stood out as looking straight. No one seemed out of place. There was no Kelly or Jamae, no frat bros in wigs. So it turns out the straight queen is Maddy Morphosis, seen here in this like vision-inspired look. And Maddy's website describes her as Arkansas's most beautiful camp and comedy queen, drawing inspiration from pop culture, art, nostalgia, and more. So yeah, this looks incredibly standard for Drag Race to me. Like if I wasn't told they were straight, there's no way in hell I would have assumed it. So what's really interesting to me isn't necessarily that a straight man is cast on Drag Race. It's more about the viewer response I've seen in the past few days, particularly on, you guessed it, Twitter, where there's like a lot of queer people taking this as like a transgressive act against the queer community itself. This idea that RuPaul's Drag Race is like a queer space and that a straight man in there is kind of like intruding on that space. Like this is a space that should only be reserved for queer people. And that by Maddy being on this show, she's kind of taking away like a space or like an opportunity that a queer person should have had. Like, how dare she even audition? And I can see like a little bit of that argument because yeah, there's not like a ton of platforms for queer people, although there's a shit ton more than there used to be. But in Twitter fashion, I can't help but notice that there's a little bit of an overstatement of harm here. And there seems to be this implication that this is going to open the floodgates so that in the following seasons of RuPaul's Drag Race, there's going to be like more and more straight men, and that it like symbolizes like our loss of a hold we have on the show, and that it's going to just assimilate completely into straight culture or something. And I just don't really see this like slippery slope argument as very legitimate. The show's format like still doesn't cater to straight people at all. Like any straight man that's going to be able to compete in this has to be pretty well versed in gay culture, and they're going to have to master like a lot of things that the majority of straight men are not going to be able to master. Like, I just don't think there's going to be a large pool to pull from here. You know, like there aren't enough straight drag queens that have these skills. There's just no way. Like, there's no way this is going to be a trend. But there's something I really want to talk about because I think it really applies to this situation. And that's like this difference between your identity and how you're perceived. Like, I might be in the minority in this, but I feel like the way you're perceived actually has a lot more to do with how people treat you rather than the way you identify. So yeah, Maddy may be a straight man. Maddy may identify as straight. He seems to be in a relationship with a woman and everything. I'm pretty sure the woman also does drag. But at the same time, you have to consider that Maddy is a drag queen in rural Arkansas. Maddy makes a living dressing up as a woman in rural Arkansas performing at gay bars. And a lot of the discourse I'm seeing on Twitter are kind of framing Maddy as this hyper-masculine, straight bro who just, you know, has no idea like about gay culture, has never faced any discrimination, has no idea what it's like. And I find that very unlikely, seeing that there's somebody who looks like this, who performs drag in rural Arkansas. Like, looking through Maddy's Instagram, there's nothing here that would make me identify her as straight. If I saw Maddy at a club, if I saw Maddy on the street in drag, I would assume that Maddy was gay. My perception of Maddy is gay. And the idea that like a homophobe in Arkansas would see a drag queen on the street say, you know, but then find out that she was actually straight and be like, oh, I'm sorry, my mistake. Like, that's not really how stuff works, is it? You know, like, whether Maddy is gay or not is not really going to affect how she's treated. Like, I think you're treated the way you present. And Maddy looks and acts gayer than I do. Yeah, maybe she had an easier time growing up. Maybe, you know, she hasn't experienced everything that a queer person has experienced, for sure. But why are we pretending that her everyday experience as a drag queen is going to be all that different from ours? Like, because she's a straight drag queen, she's going to be, like, not bothered by homophobes. People aren't going to yell slurs at her. She's not going to get accosted by chasers. Like, her life is not free from prejudice. Come on. And from the looks of it, it kind of seems like she's facing prejudice from outside and also within the community. I mean, personally, I have to wonder where we even draw the line for, like, what's an acceptable identity to belong in the queer community. In Dragula, season 2, we had a queen named Disasterina who is in a heterosexual relationship with a woman and identifies as heteroflexible. And it's kind of like nebulous what heteroflexible even means, right? Like, I'm assuming she's not bisexual, or she would have said she was bisexual. So I don't know, like, how much attraction to men is that? Or, you know, like, I don't know. I don't really care. It just seems kind of like a tenuous grasp to me. But because she said she was heteroflexible, that seemed to be enough for the community at the time. Like, there was no backlash to Disasterina. Nobody thought that she was, you know, like, taking a spot from a queer monster. So I have to wonder if Maddy were to just passingly say, oh, I'm kind of heteroflexible, would that be enough for everybody to kind of leave her alone? What if she said she identifies as, like, you know, like, more of like a he, they on the gender spectrum? Would that make her, like, non-binary enough to be queer? And I want to be clear here that I'm not insinuating anything. I'm not saying this is the case for Maddy, but in my experience, many of the straight men I've known that do drag or experiment with gender often come out as trans lesbians, like, within a few years of me meeting them. That might not be the case here, but doesn't it seem like something we should maybe be considering, you know, just in case we're wrong? Like, most trans women who are attracted to women live their lives as, you know, straight men for a while. So there is another angle that people are criticizing her from, and some people are directing this criticism more towards Drag Race itself and the casting rather than at Maddy, some people, and I absolutely agree. In fact, I made a whole video about it. So the fact that they've cast a straight man before they've cast like a cis woman, before they've really normalized casting trans queens, it stings for a lot of people who have auditioned who believe they haven't gotten on because of their identity. A lot of AFAB performers. I don't even think we're allowed to say AFAB anymore. I don't know what to call you. You're valid. A lot of valid performers. And I can empathize with that. I want to see more of you on there. But at the same time, I do feel like in the past few years, especially like the last year, we've gotten like to a point where it seems like we're really going to start ramping up casting different types of people. Gottmik last season, Kylie just won, Victoria on Drag Race UK. In fact, there are actually 2 trans women on this season competing alongside Maddy, which ironically, no one is even talking about it, even though we've been asking for it for years. And as I've said before, I don't think that this is the beginning of a trend of lots of straight men on Drag Race. I actually wouldn't be surprised if Maddy ends up being the only straight man ever cast on Drag Race. You can hold me to that if I'm wrong. I mean, it's on video. So the reaction just feels a little bit overblown. And I'd like to illustrate this by reading some of Twitter's greatest hits on the topic. Imagine being a drag queen, having drag as your safe space from all the straight men that made you feel like you don't belong. And now you'd be competing against a straight white guy on a show centered on queerness? Can't wait to hear his manufactured mirror moment about his struggle with the rejection by his father for being a, checks notes, little straight boy I'm just kidding. I'm not watching that crap. Drag is also the rejection of cis-het society and norms. Cis straight people shouldn't be co-opting something that is explicitly not for them. Gay people really can't have anything, huh? For once, we have a community and a platform that we can call our very own. But these cis-het assholes are gonna take that away from us? Why cis straight people have to invade every single space in the world? Boot. The ugly-ass drag is for everyone replies, baby, drag was built for and by visibly queer people. The fact that it's finally entered the mainstream and now the cishets want in, it's giving exploitation. And once again, something is taken away by cishet people from queers and are going to claim ownership of it and run us out of the space we built for us, like clockwork. Oh well. LMAO, the reach. Fuck cishet men. They're the reason we need safe spaces in the first place. They're not underrepresented or marginalized, and he took a queer person's space on the show. He should sit and admire, not invade our spaces. You think I give a fuck? His nasty ass took a spot from a queer person when white straight cis men have more than enough in this world to be invaded queer spaces like this. You will never change my mind. Fuck him. Drag did not start out that way, sis. Remember that. The queens-abbed queers before us were literally being harassed, jailed, and murdered by white cis men back in the day, and drag and balls were something sacred to us, a safe space. This man should have known not to apply for Drag Race and take up one of the few queer spaces on TV. It's simple. He doesn't give a fuck because he probably feels entitled to a space he doesn't belong to. Very white, very straight of him to do. This is literally what I've been fucking saying. Drag should only be for the queer community and women. Fuck cishet men. Those assholes cost me nothing but pain and suffering. Now I have to go through therapy just to fix what they did. You know what? Yes, I do hope he'll come out as bi, pan, or queer in the show, so that the season/show will have a redeeming quality for bastardizing drag and spitting in the face of queer people. I honestly can't believe I'm gonna say something like this, but fuck it, I'm tired of these bitches. Queer people, we are not each other's enemies, so stop putting a negative light on your community for wanting to be represented by our own and wanting things for ourselves. For once, we had something of our very own, so can't we have it without the cishets being like, oh, can we join too? Ooh. Hell to the fucking no. You assholes are the cause of why we made a separate space for ourselves. Because you fuckers don't want us. But y'all are the same assholes who's gonna want to be a part of our space? Hell to the fucking no. For fuck's sake, for once, let us have something for ourselves and stay the fuck away. I literally just cried from discovering that a cishet man is a contestant of RuPaul's Drag Race. Remember what RuPaul said? We as gay people, we get to choose our own family. Well, I guess the ones who caused for this family to be made in the first place is now part of it. And I know a lot of this is probably very Twitter. I know that there's probably not a ton of people thinking this outside of Twitter. Twitter's a very weird place with very extreme opinions. But I am once again very concerned with the vitriol coming out of the queer community. The complete lack of nuance. Not wanting to learn about the situation at all before making snap judgments. The incredible overstatement of harm and injustice. The rush to extreme emotional reactions and petty bullying. I really want to understand what leads these people to identify so wholly with victimhood. Like why they view everything as an attack that's causing harm and violence. If they even realize that they're using this victimhood as like a barrier to criticism, and so that they can treat people they've labeled bad people like horribly and not feel any guilt about it. In fact, they're being virtuous. In this situation, it's like they've demonized straight people so thoroughly and feel such resentment for them that they're personally trying to hold this drag queen from Arkansas who looks like this accountable for the thousands of years of transgressions against queer people by straight people. And people are going to go nuts when I say this, but it feels a little like Prejudice. Like judging someone based entirely on their identity without knowing anything about them. Like not based on any real experience you have of them. To be honest, queer leftist Twitter is one of the most extreme, hateful, angriest, most unwelcoming communities I've ever seen. I think the only one I've seen that's actually worse is probably the TERF community. And this is far from the first time I've seen the community act this way. But I'm feeling a lot of similarities to how people have been treating Harry Styles recently for dressing effeminately. The overwhelming opinion seems to be that Harry is doing something called queer baiting. And I think queer baiting is a very cynical term to use in this situation. It basically assumes that anybody who's breaking gender norms without being LGBT themselves is actually like using the aspects of queerness as like a marketing ploy. And I think that idea is just like very limiting. I've always seen the end goal, like in my mind, as people being comfortable dressing however they want, no matter what their gender identity is. But there's a lot of people that feel that we need to like hold on to this. Like we need to hold on to the parts of the queer community that make us the queer community, or else we're gonna lose it, and straights are like infiltrating or like gonna take over. So only LGBT people should be able to dress outside their gender, I guess. It's also like reductive and backwards to me, and I feel like a lot of it is actually just rooted in this idea of like it being unfair, or there being like a lot of jealousy involved. Like queer people are annoyed because Harry Styles is being embraced by the public for doing something that they themselves were probably like harassed for and beat up for as a kid. And I get that. It feels unfair. But making sure that no one else can do what you wanted to do, well, it feels petty and immature. It's like when older gays get mad because young gays like don't have it as hard as they had it. Like, bitch, that's a good thing. I thought we didn't want anybody to have to feel like they had to wear gendered clothes, like no matter what. Like no matter what they are. I feel like the whole idea of clothes having gender, that should be over, right? We want to abolish the idea of gendered clothes entirely. That's the whole point. Anyway, that was like a little segue. But there's just one last thing that kills me about this whole thing. And it's the overstatement of how valuable a spot on Drag Race is in 2021. I mean, this is going to air in 2022. Drag Race exposure is not what it used to be. There's like, is there, what, like 6 seasons a year? A dozen queens on each season? If you don't make top 4, most people aren't even going to remember you. It's just like not the career launching platform it used to be. Most queens go into debt getting their outfits ready, get kicked off in the first half because, you know, they weren't valuable to the narrative, and then develop permanent psychological issues from being harassed by the 16-year-old fan base. Anyway, if you're here from Twitter, the dislike button is below. Stay mad, I guess. I don't know. I can't communicate with you people. Bye! So I'm editing this video, and there's a clip going around on Twitter of Maddy in the Meet the Queens, where she makes a very obviously sarcastic joke about kind of like breaking boundaries as a cis white man, and everybody on Twitter is choosing to take it literally, as if she was not being sarcastic.
I'm the very first cisgendered straight drag queen on RuPaul's Drag Race. I broke that glass ceiling. Yeah, it's finally time for straight white men to have their piece of the pie.
I'm going to bed.